Hey folks, okay, well, we've gone through a lot of basics. I thought maybe I'd take a few minutes to take a look at some of the common debugging problems, common mistakes that are made, and just what the error messages look like in Lisp. So we're just going to try a whole bunch of broken things and see how they go. All right, so the first thing, so I've got a little Lisp script here that's my errors.cl. So I'm just going to, most of these I've got commented out until we get to them. So the first one that we're going to go through and play with is we're going to look at a function definition. So we've got a function f1. I forgot the parameter list in this case. And so it's got a format statement that's just printing out hello, and then the function ends. But again, there's no parameter list. So what happens is, again, defun thinks the second thing here is the parameter list. So it thinks this format t hello is a parameter list. So it thinks that format should be a variable, t should be a variable, this string hello should be a variable. And so we're going to get weird behavior when we try and run it. So what does this wind up looking like? So if we run our errors, so again, we get this weird error message telling us that t is not a variable. Not exactly the thing you'd be expecting, but again, what's happening is defun is expecting that second thing to be a parameter list. Alrighty, and it tells you, where it was coming from. The problem is coming from that f1 function, but defun doesn't figure out something's wrong. It's not until we try and call the function that it realizes, oh, wait a minute, this thing t isn't a variable. All right, so let's take a look at our second one. So again, we could get rid of this just by putting in even an empty parameter list, just to tell it that there's no parameters expected. Oops, what have I done? Defun f, oops. There we are. So we can go through and fix that beastie. Let's try our next error. So I'm just going to comment that one out so we reduce our output clutter. So for this next one, I've got function f2 that takes a parameter and prints it out. So it does a format, the value of x is tilde a, but we're missing the x. So after the string, there should be an x here whose value is going to go in the tilde a. We're just missing that. So what do we get when we try this out? Not a thing. Okay. Oh, I never called the function. So it accepts the function definition. It's not until we try and use it that it should complain. X is, and again, we've got nothing there. So it goes through and this format statement says arguments are exhausted. So it's got a tilde a, but nothing to put in it. All right, so again, we get an error message that's not necessarily terribly obvious. Lots of fun stuff to keep an eye out for. So again, if we actually threw in the x there, then hopefully it's going to tell us that x is 3. All right, what else can we do? So let's comment that one back out. And what was our third case here? How about a function that's missing the closing bracket? So I've got the format statement there closed, but there's nothing to close the function definition. So I try running this. Oops, actually I should, let's throw in what we thought would be a call to this afterwards. So in this case, it goes through and tells me, we hit the end of the file. And again, it's basically because I never closed that bracket, so it went all the way through the script trying to look for the closing bracket for that and never found one. And again, we're just, missing that closing bracket. What else can we do? How about missing a closing double quote? So this time I've got my closing bracket, but I've forgotten to close my format string. So I've got the double quote to start it, and there should be one there to end it, but I'm missing that. So let's give that a try. And let's call this one F4. And that one F5. So we'll try calling this function. But again, it's going to run into issues because we've never closed that string. And so it's quite happily sitting there waiting, looking for the end of that string. And we get into the debug mode. And so, again, I want to go back to normal operations, so I'm going to throw in a 2 there. And let's try editing that and hopefully fixing that one. And again, in theory, we should be okay. Yeah. What else can we try out? What was this last one? Oh, yeah, again, it's fairly normal at some point to forget and stick the name of your function before the parameter list instead of as the first thing inside the brackets. And again, we get this unbound variable name where it sees this F5 sitting off there by itself and it goes, I haven't seen any variable named F5. So, again, things like that, it's often simply the fact that we're missing a particular, or we've got our function name before the bracket instead of inside. Next time around, we're actually going to get into looking at lists as well. So the syntax for creating a list, and here, let's do this in the interpreter. So the syntax for declaring a list is, let's say, create a variable L. We throw the single quote in front to tell Lisp not to try and run this as a function. So 1, 2, 3, 4, for instance. Oops. We're saying create the variable L. Oopsie. Except I'm missing my opening bracket there. Create my variable L and initialize its value to the list 1, 2, 3, 4. So that sets up L. If I go through and print L, it should just print the list for me. Right, so it goes off and prints the list. If we were to try something similar, so let's create a second list L2, but I forget that single quote. So in this case, I meant this to be a list. I meant this 1, 2, 3, 4 to be a list, but because I didn't throw that single quote in front, Lisp thinks this is a function call. So it thinks this is a function call, and the name of the function is 1. So when I try this, it goes through and yells at me, and it says that there's a data error, and it's expected type function. So it's telling you that it saw a 1 when it was expecting a function. And of course, that's exactly what's happening here, where it thinks this is supposed to be a function call, and it thinks 1 is supposed to be the name of the function. So that's just telling me, in a very convoluted way, that I probably should have thrown a quote in front of that if I really wanted a list. Right? So again, that's all that's going on. So I just wanted to run through some of the weird and wonderful errors you're likely to run across in Lab 1. And if not, you'll run into them in Lab 2 or Lab 3. Sooner or later, you're going to hit almost all of these at one point or another. So just things to keep in mind. Right? See if you can find a way to get from whatever weird and wonderful error message Lisp gives you to what's going on back in the program itself. All right, I will leave that there for now.